they will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
I do not believe that there is any imminent threat in my own view. What the president was doing is sending a strong message to North Korea in language that Kim Jong-un would understand, because he doesn't seem to understand diplomatic language. And so the American people should sleep well at night.
These are the trying times. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, we stood behind JFK. This is analogous to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Messages out of the Trump administration today. The State Department saying it's all one voice about the North Korean issue. Defense Secretary Mattis putting out a statement today. The United States and our allies have the demonstrated capabilities and unquestionable commitment to defend ourselves from an attack. The DPRK, North Korea, should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. While our State Department is making every effort to resolve this global threat through diplomatic means, it must be noted that the combined allied militaries now possess the most precise, rehearsed, and robust defensive and offensive capabilities on Earth. The DPRK's regime's actions will continue to be grossly overmatched by ours and would lose any arms race or conflict it initiates. The only time we heard from the president today was through Twitter, where he tweeted, "My first order as president was to renovate and modernize our nuclear arsenal. It is now far stronger and more powerful than ever before. Hopefully we will never have to use this power, but there will never be a time that we are not the most powerful nation in the world." With that, we'll bring in our panel. Eli Lake, columnist for Bloomberg View, Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and Bill Bennett, former education secretary and host of the Bill Bennett Show podcast. Thanks for being here. Eli, let me start with you. Is it a mixed message? It seems like Secretary Tillerson is trying to dial back the tone, the rhetoric, but the defense secretary kind of shoring up what the president had said.
I think it goes hand in hand. What Secretary Tillerson is doing is he's opening a door. He's saying regime change is not our policy. We want to try to resolve this. But I think that having the threat very articulated by the president and later by Mattis. And I think Mattis was more precise in his words because he didn't talk about threats. We're always going to get threats from North Korea. He spoke about their actions. We will if we must. You know, I think that that's probably the best message at this point to send, and most people believe Kim Jong-un is a rational actor. He wants to preserve his regimes. That's why he's pursuing this capability to hit us.
Chuck.
Well, I kind of agree with Eli. I think there's, discernible, at least potential strategy, kind of good cop, bad cop routine. If you want to talk to Rex, he's available, but if you don't want to talk to Rex, you deal with Jim Mattis. Having said that, I think a lot of people were a little taken aback at the precise language that the president used, in part because it was so aggressive. I mean, there have been a lot of stories comparing it to past statements by presidents about, what would await North Korea if they got involved in a war with the United States, and this was over the top with respect to those. And people, I think, are a little concerned, like the president's never been through one of these before, and does he really know how to modulate his words and so forth. So one thing I'm going to be very curious about is how much this continues. Will the very sort of high threat level posture of the United States persist now for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or is there some kind of stand down awaiting us depending on how North Korea reacts?
On rhetoric, Sarah Huckabee Sanders had a statement in which she said about that fire and fury. General Kelly and others on the NSC team were well aware of the tone of the statement of the president prior to delivery. The words were his own. The tone and strength of the message were discussed beforehand. They were clear, and the president was going to respond to North Korea's threat following the sanctions with a strong message in no uncertain terms. So basically the words were his choice, Bill.
Yeah, he said, I'm going to be strong. And they said, sure you are. That's what we come to expect from you. But I think they're consistent. Look, literally, he's speaking in the subjunctive. If they do this, this is what they will get. And the tweet that you just read, I think, supports that. We hope we will never use this. But if we have to, we will. And then Mattis backs that up. So I think they're consistent. Look, one of the reasons that a lot of us put Donald Trump in office and voted for him is that he doesn't do things in the usual way. And he said, I think in '99 in an interview, you would know this better than I, that there's too much kicking the can down the road when it comes to North Korea. So I think he absolutely means it.
Because you tee up the sound bites.
Okay,
I've got 1999, talking to Tim Russert. Take a listen.
You say that you, as president, would be willing to launch a preemptive strike against North Korea's nuclear capability.
First, I'd negotiate. I would negotiate like crazy, and I'd make sure that we tried to get the best deal possible. Look, Tim, if a man walks up to you in a street in Washington, because this doesn't happen, of course, in New York, but if a man walks up and puts a gun to your head and says, give me your money, wouldn't you rather know where he's coming from before he had the gun in his hand? And these people, in 3 or 4 years, are going to be having nuclear weapons. They're going to have those weapons pointed all over the world, and specifically at the United States. And wouldn't you be better off solving this really potentially unbelievable, and the biggest problem, I mean, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about Social Security. The biggest problem this world has is nuclear proliferation. And we have a country out there in North Korea, which is sort of wacko, which is not a bunch of dummies, and they are going out and they are developing nuclear weapons. And they're not doing it because they're having fun doing it. They're doing it for a reason. And wouldn't it be good to sit down and really negotiate something, and ideally negotiate? Now, if that negotiation doesn't work, you better solve the problem now than solve it later, Tim.
There you have it. I mean, he wants to get to the talking.
Yeah, and I think his patience has run out. I mean, he said, and he was criticizing Barack Obama for this all along, that this strategic patience didn't work, and so he lays it forward. The problem is, we would like to go after them if they merit it, and they do, but they have a hostage. It's called South Korea, 25 million people. So it's very tough to figure out. Mattis's statement, "We will destroy your people," is in some ways stronger than Trump's. Your people will go. That'll be the end of them. But how to do this with the hostage being held is another question.
No, Eli, talking about the nuclear arsenal, there are improvements that are being made. But you look at the budget in the nuclear budget, the National Nuclear Security Administration, funding up by 11%. But missile defense, which is so crucial and being talked about, is in the Trump budget down 4%. Do you think that will change?
An inexplicable thing to me, because if anything in terms of our defense investments has proven to be well worth it, it has been missile defense. And particularly we've seen in Israel the ability to intercept rockets and sort of know which ones to go after on short range like that. Hopefully that kind of technology can be used in the North Korea crisis, where you have, I think, 6,000 or 8,000 sort of big guns pointed at Seoul. If you can figure out a way to disarm them before they can hit, and you can minimize some of that damage, then that opens up a lot more military options if it comes to that.
And Chuck, when you look back at these past administrations, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, none of them were able to move the ball on North Korea. In fact, many people could say that there was a failure on that front.
All of them went through a similar cycle where they began with confrontation. This is right off the bat, Bill Clinton and the North Koreans had a confrontation, which gave way to talks, which gave way to a supposed deal, which eventually bred disappointment, which caused George Bush to be more confrontational, which gave way to talks. And it all makes you think this drama we're watching now might be the prelude to another de-escalation, just like we've had in the past. And one reason to think that is, obviously, it's a big reason, nobody in the world wants this war. China doesn't want it, the South Koreans don't want it, Japan doesn't want it, I hope we don't want it. And the cost of it would be so tremendous that American administrations all through recent history have, in the end, chosen it's better not to fight.
That's where.
If there were a good way to do it, if there were an effective way to do it, if there were a way to do it where we wouldn't kill 30 million or 20 million, or these mobile units in North Korea attacking South Korea, then I think it would be good to have it done and over with. This is a different kind of president. We will see.